Good morning, good morning, good morning. We're just coming up on 8:30, so once again, I want to invite people back in from the breakfast area to please join us in the main room, as well as those of you who may be out in the foyer at the open house tables. Please make your way in. We will get started in just a very few minutes. And as a reminder, as is our custom, we will do the beginning with drumming, we will do the opening prayer, we'll do the briefest of comments about yesterday, and then jump right into the languages panel. What's that? Okay. And we're going to do a few prize draws. All right, and as an incentive, we're going to start doing the draws. The first draw need not be present. The next draws do.
Okay, and this is a silver spoon from Indigenous Services Canada.
Oh, awesome. So the silver spoon with the BC engraving on it from Indigenous Service Canada, and I want to thank Bill and Catherine. I'll keep this at my house, as with the other prizes that I've really liked. Darren Blaney from Homoko. Way to go. he left.
We'll do the final ISK draw after lunch, so people
Yep.
can still fill out questionnaires.
Yep, so there are, again, for the surveys, a few more opportunities, and we're going to do the final draw on that after lunch. And so let's just do a few of these before we get into our formal program. How many do we got? Just two? We have two gifts here this morning from the BC AFN. Crystal Hadzi Demetrio, Spasm. Crystal, you in the room? Going once, going twice, and that's 10 seconds more than Jesse gave you. Stacy McNeil, Skalkale. Stacy, are you in the room? Going once, going twice. Chrissy Thomas, Inklakatma Child and Family Services. Chrissy? There she is. Chief Gordon Alec, Lake Babine. Chief Alec, Lake Babine. Accepting on his behalf and thanking the Academy. He's in a secure location. So, Alec and Chrissy. So these two go back in. All right, then with that, let's close those doors if we could as the final signal to the delegates that we are going to begin. And this morning it'll be the Musqueam who are going to help us with our opening. And please help me welcome Alec Dan to the podium.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great honor for me to be here with you this morning, being the voice for my people, being the voice for my elders and my elected chief and council. Most important, it's such an honor for me to be here for my ancestors that have carried on the teachings that's passed down to each and every one of us. Because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here, dressed in my best, to be the voice for my people. On behalf of the Musqueam people, welcome you here to the unceded territory. I have a song that I want to share with you. But, before I get into that song, share a little bit of who we are. We used to occupy this whole greater Vancouver area. We used to have at least 30 villages spread throughout the area. And we had some over here in the North Shore in what is called Stanley Park, as far as Port Moody, Coquitlam, Surrey Delta, our friends and relatives from our neighboring nations, descendants of Musqueam ancestors. We were considered one nation before we got introduced to that Indian Act, and they separated us and put us in different, in our, what is called Burrard Inlet today. It was great spot to harvest shelled fish, clams, and everything like that. What is called Kitsilano and English Bay, especially Kitsilano area, it was the best spot to gather our plants to make our medicines and our herbal teas to nourish and heal our bodies. And of course, what is called the Fraser River for our sockeye salmon and our shelled fish further out in the Salish Sea. So just to share a little bit of who we are as Musqueam people. And I want to share this song. This is our become our victory song. At one time, we do canoe races, war canoe races. Single, double, 6-man, 11-man canoes. And at one time, Musqueam tried out a training canoe. It was a canoe shaped different, heavy to build up the strength for our canoe pullers. And so they decided to try out their training canoe in an actual race. People started making fun of them, mocking them, because just by looking at that canoe, other canoe pullers realized that it was just a training canoe. And there was like 60 canoes all together. And out of those 60 canoes, Musqueam ended up coming in first. And at that moment when they crossed the start-finish line to finish the race, one of the canoe pullers composed the song. And he gave it the name, the Victory Song. But I want to share this song because you know really how important canoes are to us. And everyone here coming together, getting in that one huge canoe, coming together for our communities. And I can't thank each and every one of you enough for being the voice for your communities and your people as well. So with that, to share this victory song to get us going in a wonderful good day, get us on the same canoe, get us in sync as we paddle together, thinking of our people, thinking of the future. So with that, I'll share this victory song and dedicate it to each and every one of you for all the leaving your own families at home, leaving your, and really making sure where, the people out there need to hear what's on our hearts and our minds. And that's what you're doing here today, being the voice for the people. So with that, I'll share our victory song, the Musqueam victory song, to get us all going in a wonderful, good way. Haitchkasiyam.
Oh
Siam, Haichka Siam Sia, Haitsa, Power Siam, Haichka.
So as we have worked through, thank you very much, Alec. I really appreciate that. And as we have worked through the agenda this week, we began with the Tsleil-Waututh yesterday with Bob from the Squamish, and of course Alec today from the Musqueam. And I'm very pleased to be able to introduce the elder providing our opening prayer today, so well known to so many of us and been so present with us over the years, giving us good advice and helping to keep us in line when we needed it. So please help me welcome Larry Grant.
It's Poelio. How are you? Hi? Good? Hi? Hello. See, this year, see Tarleton, to swallow up a huinamit, hui to e, to now whale, hui to e, at Vancouver, to need to tamuch at Musqueam. Stay Equinus, Yowinis, Kipalano, e Holtimoto. Set us something need to swallow, e Helixtala, I tap yours, yep. And then I tennis collar and conceits of Hamnoch, it's a Homoch, Walish, Ditalum, Tlachonak, Stilums, Tana, Hunet, Haichka. And just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone that's here, and thank you to the conference for having me here. My name is Larry Grant. Ayasak is my Musqueam name. And it was our generation's great-great-great-grandparent that was here to greet the first Spanish ship under Captain Narvaez, and also to greet the first ship under the English captain, George Vancouver. And as our ancestors, Kayapalano, had done, and also Chotimiltuch off the shores here, I raise my hands in welcome to all of you here on the traditional, ancestral, unceded lands of the Hunkamino-speaking Musqueam people that we share along with our relatives from Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh. So that's really, really an important thing to understand. And we know that in our history, the little bit of warfare that we used to have, the differences that we had, and many of us are not aware of it, but I know we have our former adversaries in the room, and today we work together very, very closely and try to work together to help each other. I understand this morning's panel is about language revitalization. I've been in the Musqueam UBC language program since 1998, and we're working very, very steadily in revitalizing our language, and it's taught in the community and accredited from the University of British Columbia that meets all your language requirements to go through the university. So it's great for me to be here today, to be able to listen to our esteemed panel that's going to be speaking about language. And that is one of the main things that I feel that if we're heading for self-determination, we need to know who we are in more ways than in English. We need to have our languages, the ones of us that have moved away from using our language, not understanding the value that's embedded in our languages. The only thing in this world that separates us in our identity is our language. If we look around the room, we're all dressed in contemporary clothes, and most of the clothes that we're wearing don't come from our culture, and we all speak English, so we have nothing to identify us, nothing to say, you come from this district, you come from this corner of the world or that corner. You have nothing to say, this is who I am, Hunt Kaminam speaking Musqueam person, me. I'm not a Kwakwala speaker. I don't come from that area. My language is worth something to us in our community. It's what identifies me. And having our languages out there tells the world that our language is worth something. It's worth more than the English trade language that we use. It's something that gives us self-worth, self-identity, complete attachment to our cultural background and our spirituality, plus all of the things that we use in today's world and call it art. And that's what our language will do for us. And if we're on the road to healing, we first have to be comfortable with who we are. And who we are is embedded in our languages. So I would just want to say those few words in recognition and thanks to the panel that's going to speak this morning. It's really, really something to try and bring it back. The value of our people is embedded in who we are in our languages. So, Colette Gonzitziatala, Taswalapa Hui Namat Hui Iti Tanawea, Itziatala Ihilaxtala, Itep Ewa Siamnas Yayatziatala. Thank you. Hi, Chapko.
Gela Kesla, I can't think of a nicer way to begin our third day, and how especially fortuitous to have you here, Elder Grant, to lead us into this languages panel, to hear your language spoken this morning as a reminder of the fact that we all have these mother tongues and that we do need to use them, and that is the foundation of who we are and who we will be in the future. I feel like I want to bring you up here to moderate this next panel, but I guess that's my job, so I'll do my best. But thank you so much, and to both of you for being here to start off our third day in such a beautiful, profound way. Our theme today, this third day of the 2019 Joint Gathering, is transforming the foundation. And so I think starting with languages is such a beautiful way to think about our foundation, that bedrock of each of our nations. And so we have 4 speakers this morning on a panel to speak to us about some of the wonderful things that are happening in globally as well as nationally, and with some of our BC First Nations in terms of revitalizing our Indigenous languages. And so I'm going to invite our panelists to come up and grab a seat with me. This morning we have Grand Chief Edward John, who's the co-chair for the UNESCO 2019 Year of Indigenous Languages Committee, and he will be speaking to that and some of the plans to do with the national or the International Year of Indigenous Languages Revitalization that was mentioned yesterday. We also have Tracy Herbert, the CEO of the First Peoples Cultural Council, and Tamara Davidson, Operations Manager for the First Peoples Cultural Foundation, who will be speaking to some of their work and the initiatives they're engaged in. And then our final speaker on this morning's panel will be Adina Young, who is, of course, the star actress of the Haida film Edge of the Knife, which was screened yesterday to a full house. And Adina will be here to speak about that experience because, of course, that film was done entirely in Haida dialects and is a triumph of creativity, cultural expression, but also a very creative example of how to do language revitalization in a way that builds up the skills of the actresses, the actors, the folks involved, but then creates this beautiful teaching piece that can be shared across the world. And of course, they have gotten much recognition for their work on that film. So please put your hands together to welcome our 4 speakers to the stage. And just while they're on their way up here, Harold and I had planned to make some comments about yesterday just to give a bit of a summary, but in the interest of time, we're going to move quite directly into the panel. We just wanted, in terms of yesterday, to acknowledge how amazing it was to hear from all of the panelists yesterday, all of the different sessions that were led by people from each of our nations speaking to how they overcame adversity in a variety of ways and how they have worked to come up with creative solutions for problems that many of us face. And so we want to really acknowledge the speakers, the panelists, the facilitators yesterday for the great work you did. We were, of course, happy to be joined by both ministers and the national chief for the first time ever at a joint gathering. Hope to see that continue. And then the last sort of comment from yesterday that I think is exciting is that there were 15 youth who were able to meet with Minister Bennett in the evening and share some of their ideas, one of which was the need for a national network to connect Indigenous youth across this nation. And so maybe when we're thinking about language revitalization and thinking about these beautiful projects that are happening in all corners, it's also interesting to think about the tools we can use to connect and learn more about what other people are doing so we can replicate their good efforts, but in a way that suits our own community. So just a couple of notes from yesterday. With that, I would like to turn it over to the Grand Chief. Please put your hands together for Grand Chief Ed John.
Hadi. Andi Jin Dine Gani Si Dakel Gayastak Tabe Hultasan Neznin Dil It Hunchi Ne Geo Jay Adat Dane Bagon Sanats at Dil Bagosa Nanisnate and Bagosa Yatsulta Kubahundo. I wanted to thank my nephew who was singing that beautiful victory song and telling a story about that. Wonderful voice and to share with us, to open our hearts and to reconnect us, each and every one of us, the songs that we have and the prayers that we have in our hearts, sometimes in our own ways, sometimes through other forms of spirituality, even religion. I want to thank my dear friend, colleague, Larry Grant, Elder Larry Grant from Musqueam. The work that he's been doing in that community for all these years, 20 years now, helping revitalize the language. And everything that he said here is really everything that we need to say up here. It was very succinct and very clear and very direct that it is the essence of who we are. We're talking about self-determination. Language is important. We're talking about health and indicators of health and well-being and dignity. Language is at the very essence of that. But, you know, it's been pretty bruised and battered over the last number of decades. In residential schools, for example, many of us attended those. But you know that you will find that in many instances, the ones who speak the language still are those who were in residential schools. The thing that very concerning to all of us, of course, is the endangered status of our languages. That, as the United Nations Secretary General said several years ago, one Indigenous language dies every 1 to 2 weeks. That's 25 to 50 languages die every year. And it's staggering to think about that. And who cares about whether these languages live or not? Well, we do. The other thing, too, is that notwithstanding the tremendous direct frontal assault of the governments through outlawing our potlatches, through outlawing our sun dances in the prairies, through outlawing our traditional forms of governments, picking up our kids and sending them in faraway places, no language is taught, no culture is taught. It was a direct assault to kill the Indian in the child. The child was me, and the Indian was my language and my culture and the traditions, the teachings that we have. But through one way or another, we managed to survive. I remember being out in the fields at Lejac Indian Residential School in Fraser Lake area. We would talk to each other in our own language as kids, because that's what we knew first, and then we had to go to school and learn English. There's direct frontal assault, so we couldn't speak that in front of the supervisors or the priests, because then we were punished. And that is a legacy that we all share in this province. We had 17 such schools in this province. And it's impacted each and every one of us right across the province. But now we're changing that resilience, that hope in our hearts, that resilience, that well of resilience that we all have. We're stepping up. And we pushed very hard at the international level because we knew the dire circumstances in our own communities. The solution's not going to come from the United Nations, and it's not come from Ottawa, it's not going to come from Victoria. That comes from our communities, how we change that, how we make it happen. But we need the support of Canada, because they were very deliberate in what they did. We need the province of Victoria, because they run the public schools in this province where many of our kids go to school. So I wanted to make those comments, this year, because and we pushed very hard when I was on the UN Permanent Forum to have an international expert group meeting on Indigenous languages. We were told we already had one in 2008. We said, well, it hasn't changed. We need to focus on it, and we did. And we made a recommendation to the United Nations General Assembly to convene a year on Indigenous languages, to put a spotlight like that light up there on where the status of our languages are globally and in our communities. And so they agreed, so they set aside this year, 2019, to do that, to focus a spotlight. So now we're going to open the international year, the United Nations, UNESCO. I was told to press that green button. I don't know where the gadget is. I have a green button. There we go. The United Nations resolution proclaimed 2019 as the year of Indigenous languages, and that UNESCO is to act as a lead United Nations agency for the year. UNESCO now is based in Paris, and they're largely responsible for the cultural heritage globally. And part of that are languages. And this year, the focus is on Indigenous languages, and UNESCO has been given the mandate to put it out there. And in order to meet their obligations, they've set up a steering committee of 14 people, 7 ambassadors in Paris. UNESCO is in Paris, and all the countries in the world have an ambassador. In France, some they are directly ambassadors to UNESCO. And Canada has one. And so there are 7 state representatives on the steering committee, and there are 7 Indigenous peoples from the Arctic region, the Pacific, the Russian Federation, Africa, Latin America, Asia, North America. And so North America and Europe, actually. And so the representative on the steering committee for North America and Europe is me. And I'm also a co-chair of the steering committee. To help and assist and to showcase and spotlight initiatives and to ensure that what we are doing and what Larry is doing in Musqueam and what you are doing in your communities are supported, enabled in every which way. Post-secondary institutions have a role in this. Teachers Federation, schools, the trustees, school boards, our own 130 schools in this province. The biggest concern we've always had is we've not really paid enough attention or support for our language experts, even though we say it is important to us. So this coming week, and perhaps the following week, we will see the legislation, 2 pieces of legislation that will be tabled, 1 on child and family services, 2 on Indigenous languages. To me, it's really significant that these come together at this point, because removing children as they did in residential schools or the 60s scoop, and the fact that our languages were not taught in foster homes or in residential schools, but were forbidden in residential schools, that these 2 pieces of legislation now will help turn back the tide of assimilation. And so for me, it's an important moment in our collective history to see this national government stepping up. We were wrong. We apologize. This is what we're going to do. We're not out of the woods. We're in this place. We're not in triage. We're in the intensive care unit, as it were, for our languages in many cases. And so we have experts and grandmothers and grandfathers who speak the language. They don't need a piece of paper to teach you your language. It helps to have that. The accreditation is important, but it's not absolutely essential. Many of us, we learn our language directly from our parents and grandparents. We don't have that luxury as we used to. Somewhere, there we go. So the main objectives, the International Year, an important means to raise global awareness of Indigenous languages and to mobilize different stakeholders and resources for coordinated action around the world by focusing global attention on the critical risks confronting Indigenous languages and their significance for sustainable development, reconciliation, good governance, peace building for ourselves, to carry on as Indigenous people for our survival, our dignity and well-being, targeting steps which will lead to improved quality of life, delivering increased capacities. to co-organize cultural information sharing and promotional events in the context of the International Year, IY, International Year Indigenous Languages 2019, to sponsor official events, activities and projects, provide know-how, human resources, equipment, tools, and other facilities in support of the year, and promote the International Year in your communications channels. For example, APTN is a partner, I think, now with UNESCO for the International Year. Every one of your communities could be a partner with UNESCO. You go into their website and you'll find how your community can be a partner in this. And you can follow through their website what's happening around the world. The youth can connect with social media. You know, whatever the social media may be, I'm not sure it's going to be Facebook for the youth, but Twitter and Instagram and all of the other forms of social communications. My brothers and my sisters, we communicate with each other on text messaging, but in our language. Hari sa tlatsin so into handitsin. Hi brother, how are you doing today? Are you doing well? And he'll respond back in Dakar, in my language, our language. The main communication message that UNESCO has put out there, Indigenous languages matter for peace building, for sustainable development, good governance and reconciliation. Sustainable development means our names on our lands and our territories, for about our mountains, our lakes, our rivers, our names of our fish, the game, the animals, the birds, everything has a name. A civilization that we have, the civilizations that we have as Indigenous peoples. So here's some contact information that I want to leave you with. The official launch by UNESCO will be on January 28th in Paris. That's next week, on Monday. And the United Nations General Assembly in New York, the president, this is where all the states come together and they have meetings. The United Nations President of the General Assembly has set aside February 1st as one day at the United Nations. He's convened a one-day special session on Indigenous languages, and that's on February 1st. An opportunity for state leaders, presidents, prime ministers to stand up and to talk about what their plans are to help revitalize our languages. I expect that Canada will be there. Who will be representing Canada? I have no idea. I've made sure that I've spoken to the Prime Minister. I've spoken to the ministers responsible, and they'll work that out. The National Chief, I know, will attend on February 1st. There's also a group that will travel from here, from the North Island, the Kwakwakawa cultural group of about 12 people who will attend at the cultural, to help in the cultural opening of the United Nations February 1st acknowledgement and celebration. And you know, I'm really, really happy to see that happening. They stepped up and put forward a request months ago to see if there's an opportunity that they might perform. When I talked about this, meeting with the Premier and the Cabinet in the fall, and I put them in touch with the organizers in New York and others, and lo and behold, that now we have a group of 12 people, I believe, who will be traveling next week to the New York event, the launch. I expect that the UN Secretary General will be there, as I said, the President of the General Assembly. If you find the time that day, the event starts at 10 o'clock. All the UN meetings start at 10, from 10 to 1, so it'll be 3 hours, and then there'll be another 3 hours from 3 to 6. If you're so inclined, you can watch, it'll be webcast, both the one in Paris, as well as the one in New York. Of course, Paris is 9 hours ahead of our time here. That event will take place in the afternoon, so it'll be early morning here. I've attended UNESCO steering committee meetings by business Skype, and they usually have them at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I'm meeting with them at 6 o'clock my time, which is not too bad. So thank you for your attention. This information, check out the website at the very top in English, IYIL 2019. I'm hoping that in all of our meetings, in our communities, in our tribal areas, and across this province, that we thread our languages throughout, because it's an indicator of our well-being, an indicator of our health, and the indicator of our resilience and the rebuilding of our peoples. And for that, I'm really happy and excited about it. And so I'm going to leave it at that, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much. Must see.
Thank you very much, Grand Chief. It's very exciting to hear about what's happening globally to support the revitalization of our Indigenous languages. I want to point out to delegates, too, that this presentation, along with all the others from the joint gathering, will be put together on the Naut'sa website, and a link will be sent out to everyone that's registered. So if you didn't manage to write down all of that important information, you should be getting a link soon in your inbox that will give you a chance to review this and other presentations. Next up, to speak to some initiatives that are happening a little closer to home, I would like to invite to the podium Tracy Herbert, CEO of the First Peoples Cultural Council. Please put your hands together for Tracy.
Right. I want to say thank you for inviting me here today. I'm grateful to be at this gathering on the territory of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish peoples. I want to say Haichka Siam to Larry. You're hard to follow. You're really eloquent and brilliant, and when you speak about languages, you really move everyone, Larry. And it's been such a pleasure to work with you for the last 20 years or so. So I'm a member of the Stuktaus First Nations, located in the interior part of the Shuapam tribe. Many of you know me, but some don't know me so well. I'm here to tell you about the work that we do at First Peoples, to share some exciting news about some upcoming events, and to talk about some developments that we're working on in terms of advocating for language legislation and the work that we've been doing with the National and BCAFN on that. Dr. Ron Igneous, Chief Ron Igneous, wasn't able to attend today. He is our representative on the Chiefs Committee on Languages for the AFN. He is in New York at the Smithsonian working on a repatriation project, but he sends his regards. So First Peoples Cultural Council, known as FPCC, is a provincial crown corporation that was created in 1990. We're the only Indigenous-led crown corporation of our kind in Canada, and our mandate is to provide leadership on the revitalization of First Nations language, arts, and heritage. At FPCC, our approach is to work in close partnership with language keepers, artists, and cultural leaders in the communities. With our community partners, we support through grants, tools, training, programs, and advocacy based on the priorities and needs identified by communities through our advisory committee and also through focus groups. During my time with the organization, I've had the great honor of working with many, many brilliant Indigenous people whose commitment to rebuilding our culture through language inspires me every day. We've achieved a lot with limited resources because of the hard work that goes on in the communities. For example, we have mapped and documented many of the languages. We've created our own list and our own map of what the languages are, and they've been identified and verified by our people. We have trained over 400 people this year. in Mentor Apprentice, Language Nest, and language planning. And we've been leveraging both technology and traditional knowledge through new tools and programs in community online, and they strongly support language learning. So First Voices is a digital tool that enables First Nations to create our own language data, and that is really, really important. We need to be in charge of our own language data. We need to own our dictionaries. And we've also created partnerships with communities and the province and organizations like Google.org, the National Research Council, the Royal BC Museum. We have an exhibition there called Our Living Languages, which really celebrates the diversity and acknowledges the amazing and hard work that our language champions are doing in communities. And it's an award-winning exhibition and one of its kind in the world. We're working on the Endangered Languages Project, which is a group of people supporting grassroots language revitalization and documentation around the world. So we've been able to share our innovative and proven approaches to language reclamation, not only in BC, across Canada, but also globally. And thanks to these efforts, we're now seen as a leader. This province is seen as a leader. The work that our communities are doing are models for other Indigenous groups working around the world. To provide a little bit of context, I know many of you know this, but Canada is blessed with the diversity of many Indigenous peoples who have more than 60 languages and 12 family groups, an indication of the rich diversity of Indigenous languages in our country. Of those languages, BC is blessed with the greatest diversity in Canada. Our province is home to 50% of all Indigenous languages in the country. With 34 unique Indigenous languages and more than 90 dialects across our 203 First Nations. So we have a lot of beautiful languages, a lot of distinct civilizations, and it's just been a real pleasure to work and to get to learn more about each and every one of our nations. The National Geographic identifies BC as a hotspot, a language hotspot in the world because of the level of our language diversity. So it's also important in terms of context to acknowledge that the natural process of learning that normally occurs in our families was forcibly interrupted for generations in our communities across Canada by colonization, residential schools, in what amounted to systematic, state-sponsored effort to extinguish our voices. Dr. Lorna Williams, a mentor and a colleague, she's an eminent scholar on Indigenous languages and education across Canada and a board member of our sister organization, the First Peoples Cultural Foundation. She describes languages as a unifying force that strengthens our people. And so when you're trying to take somebody out or take their power away, you attack their languages, and that's what's happened to us. So we really need our languages to unify us. Language is integral to our identity and the knowledge for all people. Being able to speak and pass down our language is key to our ability as First Nations to survive and thrive. It's a living expression of our identities and central to the mental, physical, emotional health, and well-being of First Nations. Our languages are unique to Canada. They come from this land. They're not spoken anywhere else in the world. Our languages are a shared heritage, and they're a treasure really for all of us and Canadians. Studies have even shown that language plays a key role in lower rates of suicide, diabetes, and we've seen that there's a lot better outcomes when children have access to language in education and health. And the people that we've been working with, both the young people and the elders who have been doing the work for 40 years, they've been telling us that their involvement in language revitalization has enriched their lives and transformed their lives. Our elders say that we need our languages to be the best version of ourselves, to know our unique history, to act on self-determination and Indigenous governance, and also to know how to care for the land. And with climate change, that is becoming more and more important. Chief Ron Igneous was telling me how they were now developing a plan to marry both the scientific and Indigenous knowledge to deal with the forest fires and all the emergencies and crises that are happening in our territory. And I think people, always think, hey, isn't it just better if everybody speaks English, and they just don't really understand how important our languages are. And it's not just about communicating in a different language than English. It's about being able to dream in our languages, pray in our languages, connect to our ancestors, and to carry on our birthright and responsibilities. And even though all of this has happened to us and our languages are still under threat because their policies still exist to suppress them in our education systems, and we haven't had a lot of funding for them, I'm really optimistic about what's been happening this past year because there's a lot of breakthrough developments that have happened. So after decades of working with very little money and even having lots of successes because the communities have been able to do miracles with $10,000, $15,000, in the April 2018 budget, the BC government invested $50 million in language revitalization for this province. And the money isn't going to be stashed away. It's going to be distributed to communities and be used over 3 years to expand and improve language revitalization and prevention programs. And so I just want to take a second to raise my hands up to the BC government, and in particular to Minister Scott Fraser, who I see is back there, to say Haichka and Kukshechum, Scott, for your support and help over the many years, because this investment shows a real understanding of the importance of language and cultural revitalization in BC. And the investment's most appreciated, and the communities are doing such great work already with the funding. So this funding is the result, of course, of many years of advocacy, educating policymakers, developing investment models by our organization, and also with input from the communities, because everybody knows what we need and what that costs. And the funding is finally allowing us to take the programs that we've developed in partnership with our Indigenous experts to all the communities in the province, and to start to create fluent speakers and to document the languages before it's too late. Because not all of the languages have dictionaries. There isn't a lot of opportunity to access our languages, because not every one of us has speakers in our family anymore. And a lot of those dictionaries that have been developed have been copywritten by linguists, and we have to pay them to use them. And so we really need to create a shift where we are in control of the language data and creating more access to it. So just a little bit more on our programs. We're creating and developing new language resources and tools around models and handbooks. We're also really focusing on language revitalization plans. We need to move away from a project-based system to a system where we're funding plans that are long-term and multi-year and across many domains, not just single strategies for language revitalization. The grants that we're awarding, we're obviously more grants, but also of higher value. We're moving away from like a $15,000 grant to more $100,000 a year over 3 years. And as a central hub for Indigenous language revitalization in BC, at FPCC, we're creating opportunities for the exchange of knowledge, best practices, and to ensure everyone has access to support their language rebuilding efforts. So on that note, we have something exciting to announce. I would like to introduce Tamara Davidson. She is the operations manager of the First Peoples Cultural Foundation.
Good morning, everyone. Hawa Tracy, Hawa Grand Chief Ed John, Hawa Jesse. Launis Hanudak Yegan. Launis is my Haida name. Tamara Davidson is my English name. And I'm very pleased to be here this morning and to make this special announcement to everyone. The First Peoples Cultural Foundation is a sister organization to the Council. The foundation was established 19 years ago and has a focus of fundraising and promotion of BC First Nations arts, language, and culture. I am very pleased to announce that this summer, together with the Cultural Council and with the Canadian Office of UNESCO as a sponsor, we will be hosting an international conference on Indigenous language revitalization in celebration of the United Nations 2019 International Year of Indigenous Languages. The Haliset Tusquale Let the Languages Live 2019 International Conference will be held in Victoria at the Conference Centre from June 24th to the 26th. This important conference will be held by First Nations for First Nations. It's going to bring together Indigenous language experts and advocates from around the world to share their knowledge and success stories about keeping their languages thriving, and to learn about successful Indigenous language projects happening here in British Columbia and around the world. We are anticipating up to 1,000 participants at the conference. We are excited that the language experts and advocates that will be coming from around the globe, they'll be invited to attend, and they'll have an opportunity to celebrate, honor, and share their expertise in Indigenous language reclamation, revitalization, and maintenance. The conference will offer multiple workshop streams and provide the participants with practical skills that they can take back to their communities and implement right away. This is an important factor that we want to bring back the knowledge and be able to use that knowledge right away. I encourage all of the First Nations leaders in this room today to join us for the conference, and encourage your community members to come to the conference and join as well, because language cannot be revitalized in isolation. We all have a part to play in this. And I'd like to just end by thanking Elder Larry Grant. I'm going to carry your words. The value of who we are is embedded in our languages. Hawa.
Uh-oh. Okay. Thanks. So I'm just going to take some time to give an update on the language legislation. I know many of you participated in the engagement sessions that were hosted by the AFN and by First Peoples last year. So as you know, most of the languages in Canada face severe threats to their vitality. There are currently no federal laws that recognize or protect the languages of this land, federal laws. In a response to calls for action from our Indigenous leadership in BC and across Canada, the government intends to introduce Legislation Act to officially recognize the languages of Canada. The intent of the legislation is to facilitate the preservation, promotion, and revitalization of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit languages in this country. So the legislation is being co-developed by the Department of Canadian Heritage and the representation from the three national organizations, AFN, the Inuit, and the Métis Nation of Canada. So the Department of Canadian Heritage engaged in consultation last year, and as well as the AFN. And through those sessions, more than 500 leaders, speakers, Indigenous scholars, and experts were participating. And we in British Columbia have been strongly advocating for this legislation and participating both at the federal government level and in the AFN's processes. And we've also developed a website, or page on our website that's dedicated to this in terms of providing information and papers. We also hosted some of the papers that communities have submitted with their opinions about what should be in the legislation. So based on 3 decades of experience working in collaboration with First Nations BC and what we've heard from our experts and our leaders, we believe that there's certain essential elements that have to be part of the Act to achieve the goals. So until the bill is introduced in Parliament, and we're thinking it's going to happen in the next week and a half, we don't know what it says, but we do know that it needs to address the immediate and urgent need for revitalization. And we need funding for programming in 2019. We can't wait to implement this. And it also must ensure that there's long-term support to secure the future of the languages. To do this, one of the recommendations is that the Act has to mandate significant, stable, long-term, sustainable funding that's easy to access to support the work going on in the communities. And also, in many of the papers, the resolutions, the Languages Task Force report of 2006, the TRC, it does talk about the creation of some sort of entity to be responsible for the development of the policies and the provision of the permanent and stable funding. When I first heard about this, I didn't understand. I thought, what do we need legislation for? I don't really support that. I definitely don't support having a national entity. You know, it's just going to create bureaucracy, etc. But now I've come to understand, because governments change, we need a strategy, and I think having a national entity could potentially be a strategy for ensuring that there's always an obligation to provide resources. And also, if there isn't responsibility delegated to an entity for the development and implementation of the legislation, then that responsibility will fall on the Department of Canadian Heritage. And I just really don't feel that they have the capacity or the subject matter expertise to do the kind of job that needs to be done in order to make sure that we have success in a very time-limited window to support the languages. So it's critical that the legislation passes in Parliament and receives royal assent ahead of the next federal election in fall 2019. If it doesn't pass before the election, the process would have to begin all over again in the next Parliament if the government decides to reintroduce the bill. And we don't know, who the government will be either. So I can't stress enough that it's imperative for the legislation to be in place because there's real threats to our languages, and we want the languages to be held up, as John says, and to be on all agendas and to be a priority. So as we wait for the draft legislation to be shared publicly, we're encouraging communities and experts to stay engaged and to provide some input on that. Where's that button thing? There it is. Oh. Where am I supposed to point? It's not working. Oh, that's the last slide? Oh, never mind then. But I'm not finished. Okay, where was I? Oh, anyway, so once the legislation is public, we'll distribute it, we'll share it. It's going to be on our website. We would like your feedback. There's lots of ways, you can give your feedback directly. You can give it through us. You can talk to Chief Ron Igneous. And I really think as many of us as possible should get on the list to make presentations to the standing committee that reviews the legislation on behalf of the Department of Canadian Heritage, just to be strategic and to make sure that our voice in BC is heard, because we have over 50% of the languages. We have a lot at stake here. Not to say that our languages are more valuable than the other languages in Canada. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is we do have more languages and a lot of work to do. Let's see. So if done right, the proposed federal legislation will create a real path for change and opportunity, and for our languages to thrive alongside the majority languages in Canada. And all Canadians have a role to play to make a positive and tangible step towards reconciliation, like to take some real action by strongly supporting the Language Act and language revitalization across Canada. Because we really need to act now to make sure that our languages don't disappear And I would really like for us to collaborate and work together to support each other to undertake the complex and challenging work of language revitalization. It is so rewarding, healing, and life-changing. And people that are going through our programs are becoming leaders and taking on the role of rebuilding our languages. And those people are supported by our elders. So in closing, I think we really need to work together across the communities that share the same languages. None of us can succeed in this alone, and there's a part for each and every one of us to play. Kuksjechum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy and Tamara, for that update and for letting us know about the upcoming conference, June 24th to 26th in Victoria, as well as the upcoming legislation and many, many opportunities there for all of our communities to advocate for this legislation, but also to take advantage of your various programs and tools to help continue our good work in our communities and spread that good work to share it with other communities. So thank you for being here. Your comments in particular about climate change and the importance of language revitalization in this time of great change and challenge reminded me of something. I was listening to a podcast a couple months ago on CBC, and there was an environmentalist named Graham Saul, and the title of the podcast, I think, was The Problem with Environmentalism. And the whole point of this podcast is how this non-Indigenous guy got a ton of money to talk to a whole bunch of people about why environmentalism is failing. Why is it that it hasn't been as successful as, say, feminism, in getting women the vote, or the abolitionists? And he chalked it up to a lack of the appropriate word. He said, the abolitionists had the word freedom, and that one word could rally people behind this idea of freedom, and so they succeeded in emancipating slaves in the States. And the suffragettes had the word equality, and so they could rally people behind this word equality, and so, within a few decades, they got women the vote. And he said, environmentalists, we just don't have a word like this. I talked to thousands of people, and they said, well, maybe it's balance, maybe it's survival, maybe it's one with nature, maybe it's, justice. Who knows? We have all these words, and so it's a problem of branding. And I'm listening to this podcast in the car with my husband, and I'm freaking out. I said, the problem is not branding. The problem is that he's speaking English. The problem is colonization, because I guarantee you that every single one of our languages has that perfect word that describes connection with nature and survival and balance and knowing our place in the ecosystem. And I think in Kwakwala that word might be a Winakiola. In other languages, maybe it would be something like Naut'sa or Naxmist. But I guarantee you that each of our languages has that word that teaches us how to live well on this planet and would help us understand how to fix the damage that's been done, or at least survive it. And so, anyways, I just wanted to share that anecdote with you because I think it's a good example of why, among many reasons, why language revitalization is important. But it has these words that teach us how to live in this time when we really know, or have to know, how to live in a better way. So that takes me to our final panel speaker this morning, Adina Young from the Haida Nation, who, of course, as we mentioned earlier, was in the film Edge of the Knife, and is going to speak with us this morning about her experiences in that film, but also the linkages between her community's planning work in their comprehensive community plan and how the goals of the community were transformed into action through the film. So please put your hands together and welcome Adina Young to the stage, to the podium.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to see you all. So my given name is Adina, but you guys can all call me beautiful. When you see the film, you'll know why. Aji tlage a tlhada la isti. Dalang a kilage gadi gudanga. Slailwatooth, Squamish, Scan Musqueam, Hade Dalangya, Tlage Uau Ija. Dalang Wadluan, Undi Yakudanga, Haua. Guljat Anga, Kilsly Anga, Hadalasis. Galang aus kiltlagang, diu au hadagang, ga odas gustu di kolagang. Jatkin jas hinu di nan had kiagang, kun au hinu di au kiang, kun jadas hinu di kiang. The people on this land, I honor you. I want to thank you all. Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam, this is your land. I want to respect you all and say thank you. Ladies held in high esteem, chiefs, good people, thank you all for listening to me. I'm a Masset Haida of the Eagle Moiety. I belong to the Athlanis clan. Jutkin Jess is my late grandmother's name. Kun Au is my mother's name. Kun Jadas is my Haida name. In 2016, I was elected to the Old Masset Village Council as a council representative. In the latter half of my elected term, I was the deputy chief councillor. My term ended in December 2018, and it's an honor for me to be here speaking, giving a presentation as to a project that our community put together. We have 2 village councils on Haida Gwaii, one from Old Masset and one from Skidegate. And through the Skidegate Comprehensive Community Plan, language revitalization, language survival was a priority, and this is how our project came to be. So listening to our community members and being able to implement what it is they're asking for, and being able as leaders to give that support to help with our culture and our language was something that I was extremely honored to do, because at the time, when I put my name forward to audition for the role, and at that time when I was auditioning, I had no idea that I was gonna run for council. Well, maybe I did, but I wanted to be an actress too, so it was fantastic to be cast in that film, and then a few months down the road, be elected into a leadership position. It was one place, a conference like this, I had asked that our people who are helping us develop policies and procedures and help us support each other was to come into the communities and see what we can do. So I felt like I was leading by example by, working from the ground up. And it was a big privilege for me to be in that position. So The Edge of the Knife, Skawe Kuna, is a feature-length film done entirely in Haida language. I believe our language really is spiritual, and our spirituality is our culture. So I'm going to quote our director's introduction from when we went to the Toronto International Film Festival. The movie is about Gagit, or Gagi Hit. There's different ways of thinking about it, and we tried to honor all the ways of thinking about Gagit. For example, when spending extended amounts of time in the woods, even with all the amenities like fire, good fire and things, you start to become estranged after that extended amount of time. You call it getting bushed. What happens when you experience a major trauma like falling into the ocean or something like that? We begin to exist on a survival level. So one way of looking at it is like a purely visceral story of survival. Among our people, we talk about it in a way of a weakened state when one starts turning to Gagit. And when we're in that weakened state, spirits can enter us and they live through us, they act through us. It also exists in our Haida secret societies. Gogit dance is one of the main dances that we use in potlatches and things. That's the reason why that we decided as a first Haida film we'd tell this story, because it's something that Haidas know broadly. There's not a Haida that doesn't know who Gogit is or Gogihit. So we look at the story as individuals, an individual's journey through what the world might throw at them, and also as our responsibility as the community to hold those people close, unquote. So when we did the screening on Haida Gwaii, there were over 500 people in Skidegate, and there were over 600 people in Masset. When we made it to the Toronto International Film Festival, it was a breeze for us because we had great satisfaction from our own community. And if our community were disappointed, I don't think I would come up or be as bold as I am today. So there's a lot of pride and a lot of support in the endeavors that we're doing moving forward as communities and as leaders. Because we did this film, the director is Haida, the co-director is married to a Haida. The initiative that came from the film, the idea was from our Haida people. We were fortunate to have a director of photography who respected who we are on our land and on our territory. He listened to our cast and our crew who were there, and he allowed the people behind the scenes and in front of the camera share the importance of our culture. And one of the biggest impacts on me when I take a step back and look at the big picture is that the impact of this film, for us to be there, it's not Hollywood telling the world who we are as Haida people. It was us. We were in charge. That's how we can get control over identifying Indigenous and identifying our strength. I want to reiterate what was said was that our connection to culture and a connection to our language is so strong, is that when we try and describe something in English, you can't really find the right word. And when we were talking in Haida and doing some of the screens, we talked with our body, we talked with our language, we talked in different ways of our surroundings and our environment around us. We talked by reading each other and being able to understand the emotions that are behind it. So our languages pull those emotions out without having us to describe exactly what that emotion is. Our languages are our expressions. So one of the things that I'm encouraging to do, people who even know just a little bit of your language, to use it. One of the things that somebody had said to me was, we don't hear the adults enough. When we're little, we're tiny, we're babies, we can talk our language, even if it's just good morning or you're beautiful. 2 little words, 3 little words from the time they're born, and it'll progress. So if we can encourage our adults, our teenagers, to speak what they know and have that language coming out every day in any way, shape, or form. So one example of how powerful our language is, I have 4 children, and I'm fortunate to have, they were all cast in the film with me as well, and my husband. So I was really lucky. I had 2 husbands in one movie, and nobody even knew. And so we're with the kids, hey, we're gathering around, and I was saying, okay, come on, let's go. And my boy, he's small, he's only 4, and he's real rambunctious and wants to play all the time. And I said, come on, let's go, we gotta go. And he's still playing, not listening. So I said to him, Haskuiska, and he jumped up really quick. He knew the language, I only had to ask him once. And that's the power of our language. That's how we can empower our own people. I'm not sure how much time I have left. Okay, I'll leave it there. I want to say thank you to everybody for allowing us to be here and allowing us to have these conversations. And in closing, I just want to let our other guests know that I do have some posters that are going to be sent to you, and it's a poster of our language film, Skawe Kuna, Edge of the Knife, and it's been up for many nominations at the Toronto International Film Festival, the Vancouver International Film Festival. There's screenings happening all over the world right now, so maybe there's an opportunity to show it at the United Nations. Wink, wink. But please keep an eye out, encourage each other, empower each other, and hold each other close. Perry Bellegarde, our national chief, said it very well in his speech, that no matter what territory, no matter what corner of the world we're in, we all live the same. We all have that same respect for our land. We have that same respect for our people around us, our surroundings, and the care of our natural resources and the way that Mother Nature can provide for us as long as we care for her. We're deeply intertwined, we're interconnected in many ways, and stay strong. We'll get through this. Hau'a.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Adina, for being here to share your community story and the story of your experience taking part in this important project. I've been asked by Tracy to remind you that the First Peoples Cultural Council does have a booth upstairs, and there's a beautiful interactive languages display there, I think, right, that you can check out. So please do visit them. I have a couple of housekeeping announcements before we break. We've got a few moments, but just before I give those, Grand Chief would like to issue a little bit of a challenge to folks in the room with regards to language revitalization.
I think just really to underscore our own commitments as nations here in this province, think about this idea of making your language the official language of your nation. How we build it from there, who knows? But if we start from there, then at least we know our commitment. I'm sure some of you have already done that. But you know, it's a way to demonstrate now our commitment, and how do we exercise that? How do we implement that? And we'll find the way. I know it. So just an idea. I think we should do it. Thanks.
Thank you, Grand Chief, and to all of our speakers on this morning's panel. What a beautiful way to begin our day, thinking about our foundations and how we can do this important work moving forward. Please put your hands together one more time for our 4 panelists.
Tell them your linguist.
I was mentioning to Grand Chief just while we were on stage here that This topic is really important to me. Not many folks know this, but I'm a trained linguist. It was my undergraduate degree, and I'm actually the 4th generation in my family to study with a university to work on language revitalization. And so I know many of your communities also have many generations of people that have been engaged in this work, and so that's a good legacy we can build on. Just a few more moments here. After our break that's coming up in a moment, you have 3 options of where you could be. In here, there's going to be a plenary, which is the BC Region Overview Report with Catherine Lappa and the executive leadership team from BC ISC. We also have 2 interactive breakout sessions. So in Grand Ballroom D, we have the First Nations Education Supporting Student Success session. And then upstairs, we have Child and Family Services Networking on Community Wellbeing. At the same time, for the youth that are here, there's a session on leadership in language and arts taking place in the Mackenzie Room. We really need to be careful about time today for many reasons, but one is which many people will be traveling at the end of the day, and so we will need to end on time. So I will strongly ask the facilitators for those sessions to allow people to move to the 11:15 session in time. So please make sure to wrap up the break or the plenaries after the break by about 11:05, 11:10 to give people time to move. At 11:15, there's a plenary in here on Indigenous institutions supporting economic capacity through partnerships. And then upstairs, there's an interactive breakout session on the Housing and Infrastructure Council and elder and youth recording some pop-up videos if you wish. Lunch starts at 12:15 today, but it's going to be a bit of a short lunch because we will be having the elder and youth report out. It says 12:30 in the agenda, but it'll probably be closer to 12:45 just to give you that half hour to get your plate and get back to your table. And so we will ask that by 12:45 everyone's at their tables, ready to hear back from the youth and elders in the room as they give their report out, which of course will take us into our closing remarks, hoping to be finished today by 2:15. The 2 final housekeeping announcements are that if you have a travel claim form, please return it to Naut'sa. And if you've lost anything over the last few days, all lost and found is being returned to hotel reception. And so the hotel reception lost and found will have any items. I think a few coats and glasses and things have been left behind. Other than that, enjoy your short 15-minute break, and at 10:15 we'll begin our next round of plenaries. Thank you very much.